Key Account Management. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jason Broomfield, a Senior Account Director here at Nexl, and I'm very privileged to be joined today by John Clemente, the Director of Strategic Accounts at Mint. Now, for today's topic, we're going to be speaking about all things Key Account Management, or CAM, as we like to call it. We're going to talk about what it is, if you should implement it at your firm. If you are already, what are some of the challenges you might be facing? What can you do to overcome them? And then we'll also talk a little bit about the industry and how it differs from other industries like other professional services, consultancies, etc., and how the industry, our legal industry, is changing and what that means for you as a business developer. So, whether you're a CMBDO with 20, 30 years experience, or whether you're just getting into the game, stay tuned. There's going to be some really helpful tips on its way. And without further ado, let me hand over to John for a quick introduction to yourself.
Oh, thanks so much, Jason. It's a pleasure to be with you today. As you mentioned, Director of Strategic Accounts at Mint, and I've been with the firm for about 5 years now. So I joined to come in as the first man and really to start thinking about this concept of key account management. And at that point, we were a 3-client pilot, very entrepreneurial period for myself and the firm, coming in trying to think about how can we create some of those quick wins and that proof of concept that there's value in this for both the internal clients, the partners of the firm, and then our external clients. Now we've scaled things up to a family program with about 20 clients in total and 4 full-time employees. So quite a bit of growth, and it's been a really exciting journey for us. So proud to be part of it.
Epic. I love that. And what I love about that is that when you came into the role, you're probably in a similar position to a lot of our audience, which, they may have a program in place. It might not have quite, gotten momentum yet, or there could be a lot of discussions and thoughts about an industry go-to-market plan and, an offshoot of that being key account management. So, just on that note, maybe you can share what it was like trying to get this program going at your firm.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I had a bit of an advantage in that I had quite a bit of background in the concept of key account management before I got here. So I really grew up in the Big Four accounting and consulting firms. And this has been a fully baked approach at those companies for quite some time. So I got my start back in 2006, and those firms had really gone through a very similar transition as I see happening in law today, in that they were formalizing this idea of going to market from a client and industry perspective, rather than maybe more of a practice perspective, as we see across most of the law firm industry. So coming in, I had this body of work and this expertise from having seen this approach play out and perfect it with lots of best practices. But it was thinking about how do we make this work in a law firm environment. So, my observations when I came in was that there was tons of opportunity to really add value to the client relationships at law firms by taking that approach. And it was just fine tuning. But I will say that some of the environmental factors for me when I arrived were really critical to our success. So we had top-down support from our managing partner, who not only blessed the pilot, but also got involved in the pilot. And I think getting the organization behind that and actually putting skin in the game has really been helpful for us as we've built an advocate for the program internally. We also took a very thoughtful approach to selecting accounts, and we can touch more on what that looks like and why it may or may not make sense at specific firms. But, by doing that, I think we've rolled in a great group of partners that really appreciate the type of support that we provide, but also are, have the mentality for growth and added value through the relationships that, make this work.
So, John, like a lot of our audience might be wondering whether they should implement a key account management plan or not. I believe that you should across the board, but, what are your thoughts on this? And are there any reasons why you would not implement this sort of plan?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very good question. I think that most firms have a group of clients that are particularly important, whether from the length of the relationship, a brand perspective, importance from a size perspective to the firm. I think those are some of the environmental factors that would exist that would lend itself to a key account manager coming in and adding value to the relationships. And value is an important word here, right? We want to lead with value. We try to drive incremental value and client service value through those relationships, help our partners navigate the depth and breadth of the firm because they may be very much focused on their active practice or the practice in which they belong. So some other situations where key account management might be right for you. One, if you have a fragmented revenue base and you're thinking about how you can institutionalize a handful of relationships, that's one potential opportunity. I think when you're looking to drive growth of the relationships, or you think you have capabilities and resources of the firm that would be very complementary to the needs of existing clients, I think key account management can be very valuable in that it will help those teams navigate their firms and figure out where those resources exist and how to create a value proposition to bring them to your clients. As far as when it wouldn't make sense, again, if you're not at a point where you can get all of the key stakeholders at the firm on board, or there isn't an appetite from the top down to support this, it really can just feel like a disparate effort. You need to get the firm behind you and really have this become part of the culture and what they do. And that's been, at least in my experience here, essential for our success. And that's one of the hardest things to get. So I think if you're sitting in the seat and saying, I love the idea, I love how this sounds, it makes sense on paper, but I don't think my firm is ready for it, it might not be the time, right? Because it's tough to get the acceptance and the cultural acceptance of what this is if the firm's not ready.
Yeah. I mean, and even if the firm is ready, there's always going to be some partners that are resistant to it. So in a sense, I think you're always going to be dealing with some sort of resistance to change. I think maybe the message is, tenacity, persistence, don't be afraid to be shot down. You probably will, but you should push on. What other sort of advice would you offer our BD folks that are looking to implement this, but might be, getting a little bit of resistance from leadership?
Yeah, I think spelling out the benefits for what it might mean for the clients, I think is very helpful. So if you're thinking about building a business case, do your homework, do your analysis, look at the client base, try to identify those relationships that sit in an industry where you have particular strength, that have really good relationships across the legal team where they might have an appetite to learn more about what the firm can do for them. Do your homework. And then start to build the business case around that. Like if you can make it real for the leaders, then it's going to be a lot easier to convince them as to why it works. Just saying, I think it would be good for our clients probably isn't enough. I think you need to spell out some specific planning items as to why you think this will make sense, what this might look like to stand up, who should be involved, what support you'll need from the firm in order to do it, and how that all comes together. A lot of it too is just like many things in life, just giving it a test drive, right? So, you can start small. Don't feel like you need to have a 20 client program from the very beginning. I started with 3, right? And I was with 3 for quite a while until we got to the point that we had built enough acceptance, best practice, and advocates for the program to be able to go out more broadly. So even a little step, like the first step is the hardest one, right? So even having a limited scope in the early days can be helpful for seeing if, one, it can actually stick at your firm, and 2, whether you're finding the partners and the clients are finding value in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great takeaway. When you think of key account plan at a law firm, you think, geez, a structured, implemented program with all your clients and a lot of effort, really. And now you're going to try and present this, and people are resistant to change. You're asking them to take their time to try something new, and actually they're pretty successful as it is. So it can be a bit of a struggle. And I think the message is start small, start with one, and then take it from there. So let's just talk about that. Let's just talk about that one then, right? So for me, a key account plan is, mapping out an account, understanding all the stakeholders, understanding a bit of their strategy, etc. Could you elaborate on what you did for those 3 accounts in terms of the kinds of information that helped you grow this program?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, I brought in some good best practices and experiences. I think I came from a world where everything was a key account at a different level. And the program was so sophisticated that it had kind of tiers to it, and that would determine the resourcing model and a very formal account planning process that happened annually with key milestones, et cetera. So I'd come out of that rigorous structured environment and then came into kind of a blue ocean, right? I could have structured it however I wanted to. I kind of focus on fundamentals, right? So what I like to do is really go deep on each of the clients that I work with. So being the business background, I used to be a consultant, did some delivery work. I like to pick apart the business, think about all of the business units, the company strategy, what they're viewing as their position in the market, what are the opportunities. That's kind of my baseline. What I then do is go down and I start thinking about what does our existing relationship look like today? How are we supporting those objectives? What I then do from there is go down a step further and say, in areas where we're not supporting their objectives, where do we have resources and capabilities of the firm that would be very valuable to them, whether from a working perspective or from an additional value add perspective? Can we introduce them to other people that have something to say or can give them off the clock advice on a really emerging technical topic or industry trend? And that starts to create the foundations of the plan. The most important thing in this, though, are relationships. So typically what I will do is do an inventory of all of the relationships at the client. And that usually shakes out into a handful of folks that we know very well and we work with every day, and a handful of folks that we might have no exposure to or have never met altogether. So what this does is it shows us here's where we should be focused on because it's going to be the most impactful to the client's strategic agenda. Here are the people that are going to be the most influential in terms of helping us to affect the value we want to add. And we have a plan for the things that we're going to present to the client, as well as the specific relationships we hope to deepen or develop with the client. So that's at a very high level. I know that's a lot in a very short time, but that's kind of how I cook these up.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's I think you're just sort of tip of the iceberg there. And what do you think the client experience is like when this sort of effort and knowledge is put in for them?
Yeah, well, I can say I know what I want it to feel like. I want it to feel like they have a trusted strategic partner who is proactive to their needs, who's thinking about them all the time, who's monitoring the market, monitoring their competitors, monitoring trends, and looking to add that value through the relationship. And I think it's important to understand, this is also going back to where I came from. Within the Big Four space, your competitive set is fairly limited in that there's one that audits you and three that probably do a lot of your financial advisory and advisory work. And all of them are excellent, right? So like the only way you can differentiate is by adding additional value to the relationship and being that proactive advisor. Fast forward to law, it's even more competitive, and right, there's plenty of very smart people who are excellent at what they do in all of these firms. So I said it earlier, focusing on value as the key driver is very important because that's going to be what helps to differentiate you from a client service perspective, helps you to cut above the clutter, etc. So that's what we aim for. We want our clients to feel like they have a true partner through the relationship.
Yeah. You touched on something really important, and that is, the level of skills that across the industry, across your competitors are very compelling. They deliver great work. So how else could you possibly differentiate? And, this kind of ties in a little bit to how the Rainmaker model might be being disrupted around how firms are reimagining how they go to market. Maybe you can just share a little bit about what you think about that and maybe what it will look like in 5 years' time.
Yeah, it's an interesting time for the industry, right? I read a study recently that was talking about the Rainmaker model and how legal spend is being assessed in the same way as like many other spends of the organization. Maybe that was a little bit different, but the role of legal operations has emerged in at least the past 5 to 7 years. We're seeing formalized functions focused on legal spend, and they're demanding more from their partners, as any procurement function would. At the same time, there's pressure on costs, there's pressure on rates. They're demanding, more value, And that's leading firms to consider, where can they achieve some efficiencies, right? Maybe it's alternative service providers, maybe it's boutiques that specialize, maybe it's coming down to a limited number of firms that they work with, right? So all of these things are happening in the market. And to your point about differentiating, right? The firms that are doing the best in terms of delivering that value, differentiating on client service, showing their value as a true partner, are going to succeed and win. So I see that happening. Like, client loyalty is driven through sustained client satisfaction. And what we aim to do through the program is to help promote that sustained satisfaction by, delivering the full firm to our clients. So that's a little bit of what I see, at least in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you look at other industries as sort of like a leading indicator, they've all kind of followed that trend. But it does sound like, there's a lot of work, there's a lot of intangible benefit, and ultimately revenue being the bottom line is the ultimate measurable. However, that can be quite a while away in terms of all of this effort. How do you manage that when you're selling this to your partners? What are the quick wins or metrics that you use to show success before the revenue is realized?
Yeah. It's funny. I always call revenue a lagging indicator. Because the life cycle or the timeline of a lot of what we do, when we think about how work comes into the firm, it's a long-term effort, right? It's 12, 18 months. It's not 1 to 3 months. Revenue growth is good, but every client is completely different, right? So in some cases, we might have such a significant relationship that our main objective is to just remain the preferred partner for that client. So revenue growth might not be as important as ensuring that everyone is ultimately satisfied with our services and we're continuing to be the go-to across multiple areas, right? So there may not be a growth play there. It might be more of a protection play or a retention play. I think where I see KPIs that show that we're doing a good job, one is formally through client service feedback. So when we measure how we perform in client service feedback over time, I think when we see questions focused on whether we're a partner, if they're getting everything they want out of the firm, how they view the firm in terms of the competition, we can track that over time. So it lets us know, like, we are actually delivering results and seeing this affect the relationship. Our ability to add or introduce subject matter experts that are relevant to their needs. I also think that's a KPI. Like, if we've been a one practice provider for a client forever, and now all of a sudden we're starting to get small incremental growth in relationships in other areas, or we're starting to broaden their view of us, right? I view that as a KPI and something that we can measure over time. Also, all of our firms have assets of the firm, thought leadership, events, various opportunities to kind of add that incremental value through these assets, and measuring, how much more of that you're actually getting in the hands of your clients and serving as the last mile of delivery for those things with a personalized touch. Is another example KPI. So, I track all of these things because there's a lot of moving parts and lots of degrees of success. But I think when you see that you're effectively doing each of those things consistently and measuring your success over time through client service feedback, you can get a real sense on the value you're delivering to the client.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like trust the process. Be consistent with the process, and the results will speak for themselves. But just speaking about client feedback, that's another really untapped resource. I mean, not only do you get real insight into how you're delivering your services, but it's a great relationship builder with your clients. And if you've got a good key account management plan and you've got a good structure, you'll probably identify opportunity just through that sort of feedback process. Back to something that you said earlier around top-down support. I mean, I agree. I think that is a critical success factor. When it comes to lawyers who, are really good at what they do, but they are not great business developers, they've got a history of overachieving and doing really well, and now they're put in a position where they need to develop business and they're almost a little bit uncomfortable. How do you manage that? Because that really is another key success criteria to get that right.
Yeah. Well, for folks in my role, I think that's a huge opportunity. Number one, I love, part of this role is planning, part of this role is being a coach, and helping to think about being the client strategist for the clients that you work on, and aiding in that transition, or helping to be a lieutenant from a business development or a client relationship perspective is great, because even though someone may not be comfortable or have built those skills over time, many of the folks in my role have. So we can lend our expertise to those clients. So I think when we think about a program like this, and at least the way we've structured it, there's the direct value to the clients, but then there's the internal value to the firm, because you serve as the voice of the clients in the marketplace as a non-attorney and a non-billable resource. So you're bringing back insights from seeing what's happened in the trenches with the firm's most important clients, which ultimately results in the accumulation of best practices, lessons learned, what's working, what's resonating. So part of my role, I actually serve in kind of a client service excellence function at our firm. So doing trainings for pockets of the firm, particularly folks who are making the jump into membership, and trying to bring some of what they will see as they make that transition from the market. Also kicking out best practices. So thematic newsletters and other things that are going to help the entire firm get a sense of what we're seeing, what we're hearing from our most important clients. And I think that added value is, I mentioned earlier, there's value to clients and value to the partners. I think that kind of slots into that value to the partners.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely agree. So, just to zoom out and, play some of this back, number one, it's almost, critical to have some sort of a key account management program these days, and particularly looking forward, it is the way you differentiate. Some of the challenges being, sort of top-down buy-in, some cultural changes, some resistance to change. How to overcome that? Well, as you said, start small. Celebrate the quick wins along the way. It doesn't have to be revenue, but the other sort of metrics, and really provide the feedback that you get from your clients back to your partners, in the hope that they will see the value, and ultimately support you with the program. For our audience out there, are there any sort of tangible last tips you'd like to leave them with in bringing in a program like this to their firm?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that you do not have to have a formal program to take the best practices from a key account program and have it add incredible value to your existing relationships. So if you're a law firm business development person, regardless of your level, you can take the idea of being strategic about helping a couple of partners from your section think through their most important relationships. You can take a proactive approach to tracking those clients over time and trying to identify opportunities to add value. You can help them think through client service feedback. You can help coach them on business development, as many of you already do. So all of these things don't require a formal program for you to implement aspects of in your daily role as a business development person. Now, if your firm is ready for a formal program, that's amazing. And you can formalize things around that and then use that as a tool for delivering value, but also collecting insights and spreading them around the firm. But I think, everyone has the ability to do this. It's just getting a sense for what the key activities are and how they're impactful.
Absolutely. Well, on that happy note, John, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. That was really, really helpful, and I'm sure our audience will feel the same. And to everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed that. Get in touch if you have any questions. And until next time, thank you very much.